Lord Varkith was one of the most powerful dragon merchants in the entire galaxy. His crimson scales gleamed like polished rubies, and his trading empire stretched across 17 different star systems. He had more wealth than most planetary governments, owned a fleet of massive cargo ships, and had produced dozens of children who all followed in his footsteps. Well, almost all of them. His youngest daughter Ember was different. While her siblings had beautiful crimson or gold scales that caught the light magnificently, Ember's scales were a dull bronze color that looked almost dirty. Her horns didn't grow straight and proud like proper dragon nobility, instead they curved awkwardly and unevenly. But the worst part, according to Varkith, wasn't how she looked. It was what she loved to do. While other young dragons studied trade negotiations, battle tactics, and the fine art of intimidation, Ember spent her time in the engine rooms of their ships. She'd sneak away from her tutors to watch the mechanics work, asking endless questions about how fusion drives operated and why coolant systems were designed certain ways. She'd come home with her claws black with grease and her scales smelling like machine oil. Varkith was ashamed of her. At important gatherings, other dragon lords would ask about his children, and he'd talk proudly about his sons and older daughters. But when they asked about Ember, he'd change the subject quickly. Some of the crueler nobles had started making jokes about her behind his back, wondering if she was truly his daughter at all. Then came the day when Varkith's prized flagship, the Crimson Glory, suffered a critical malfunction halfway through a trade route. The ship's main engine had developed a problem that none of his crew could solve. They limped into Rust Haven, a dusty frontier world that served as a way station for independent traders and prospectors. The only mechanic available was a human named Tom Brady. Varkith almost refused. Humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy as reckless tinkerers who ignored safety protocols and treated advanced technology like children's toys. But he had no choice. His shipment was time-sensitive, and every day of delay cost him a fortune. Tom showed up looking nothing like a proper engineer. He wore a stained work jacket, his hair was messy, and he carried a battered toolbox that looked older than some of Varkith's crew members. But when Tom opened up the engine compartment and started working, something amazing happened. The human didn't just fix the problem. He identified 3 other issues that would have caused failures within the next month, rerouted some power couplings to improve efficiency, and had the entire ship running better than it had in years. The work that Varkith's certified engineers said would take 3 weeks, Tom finished in 4 days. Varkith was impressed, though he'd never admit it out loud. When it came time to discuss payment, Tom surprised him again. "I don't need credits," Tom said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What I need is help. I run this repair station alone and I'm drowning in work. Every ship that comes through here needs something fixed, and I'm turning away jobs because I can't handle them all. If you've got someone skilled who wants to learn, send them my way as an apprentice. That's all the payment I want." Varkith's mind started working immediately. He had the perfect solution, one that would solve 2 problems at once. He'd send Ember. The human wanted an apprentice? Fine. Let him deal with Varkith's embarrassing daughter for a while. It was perfect revenge for the human's earlier arrogance too. Tom would quickly realize that Ember was useless for anything except getting in the way. Within a few days, maybe a week at most, the human would come begging Varkith to take her back. It would teach Tom some humility and remind him that dragons were superior, even the defective ones. Varkith made sure to announce the arrangement in front of his entire court. He wanted everyone to witness how generous he was being, sending one of his own children to serve a mere human mechanic. The other nobles snickered behind their claws, understanding the insult perfectly. When Varkith told Ember about the arrangement, she didn't argue. She never did. She just nodded quietly and packed her few belongings, mostly tools she'd collected over the years and technical manuals she'd stolen from the ship's library. The trip to Rust Haven felt like an execution march. Ember had been rejected her whole life, but this felt different. Her own father was shipping her off to some backwater station to work for a human, and everyone knew it was because he was ashamed of her. When the shuttle landed at Tom's repair station, Ember's first thought was that the place looked like organized chaos. Parts and components were scattered everywhere, half-assembled projects covered every work surface, and the whole place smelled like welding torch and machine coolant. It was completely unprofessional by dragon standards. Tom came out to meet her, wiping his hands on his jacket. Ember prepared herself for the look she always got, that flicker of disappointment when people saw her dull scales and crooked horns. But it never came. Instead, Tom's eyes went straight to her claws, which were already stained with oil from nervously fidgeting with a small wrench during the flight. Then he noticed the tool harness she'd made herself, with custom loops and pockets positioned perfectly for dragon anatomy. His face broke into the biggest smile Ember had ever seen. "Wait, you actually work on machines?" Tom asked, his voice full of genuine excitement. "Like, you actually enjoy this stuff?" Ember nodded slowly, confused by his reaction. "Oh man, this is perfect." Tom laughed, already walking back toward the main workshop. "Come on, I've got a fusion drive that's been kicking my butt for 2 days. I bet your claws can reach the coupling I can't get to." For the first time in Ember's entire life, someone looked at her with pure appreciation. Not disappointment. Not pity. Just honest excitement about who she actually was. She followed Tom into the workshop, and something inside her chest felt warm in a way it never had before. Tom's repair station was nothing like the pristine, organized workshops Ember had seen on Dragon vessels. Every available surface was covered with projects in various stages of completion. There were engine components from species she'd never even heard of, experimental modifications that looked half-finished, and tools scattered everywhere like someone had just dropped them wherever they were last used. The whole place hummed with energy and possibility. Most dragons would have been horrified by the disorder. Ember felt like she'd come home. Tom didn't waste any time with formalities or orientation speeches. He led her straight to a massive fusion drive that was partially disassembled on the main work platform. The thing was huge, easily twice the size of anything Ember had worked on before. "Okay, so here's the problem," Tom said, pointing into the depths of the engine. "See that coupling down there? The one that connects to the secondary plasma flow regulator? It's seized up solid and I can't get my hands down there to apply enough torque. My tools can reach it, but I can't get the right angle to actually turn the thing." Ember leaned in and looked. She could see exactly what he meant. The space was tight even for her smaller dragon claws, but it was accessible. More importantly, she could see that the coupling wasn't just seized, it was installed incorrectly, which was probably why it had failed in the first place. "I can reach it," she said quietly. "But I think the problem is bigger than just the coupling." Tom looked at her with interest. "What do you mean?" Ember traced the plasma flow path with one claw, showing him how the components were connected. "The coupling keeps seizing because the flow rate through this section is too high. See how the pipe diameter narrows right before the coupling? That's creating pressure that's stressing the joint. If we just replace the coupling, it'll fail again in a few months." Tom stared at the engine for a long moment, then let out a low whistle. "Holy cow, you're right. I completely missed that." He grinned at her. "Okay, so how do we fix it?" This was the moment Ember usually got shut down. She'd make a suggestion, and adults would pat her on the head and tell her to leave the thinking to the professionals. But Tom was looking at her like he genuinely wanted to hear her idea. "We could reroute the secondary flow through this auxiliary channel here," Ember said, pointing. "It's currently unused, and it would split the flow between 2 paths instead of forcing everything through one narrow coupling." Tom pulled up a holographic schematic and started running calculations. The auxiliary channel wasn't designed for that kind of flow rate, but if we upgraded the insulation and added a second regulator here. He worked through the numbers quickly, his fingers dancing across the display. "Yeah, this would actually work. Better than work, it would run about 15% more efficiently than the original design." Ember couldn't believe what she was hearing. He wasn't just listening to her idea, he was building on it, improving it, treating her like a real engineer. They spent the next 6 hours completely rebuilding the fusion drive's flow system. Tom's hands moved with practiced confidence, but he constantly asked for Ember's input. When she mentioned that Dragon Engineering used a different approach to heat distribution, he immediately wanted to know more. When she suggested using a material combination she'd read about, he didn't dismiss it. He looked up the specifications and they tested it together. Her dragon claws proved invaluable in ways Ember had never imagined. She could reach into tight spaces that would have required hours of disassembly for Tom. Her scales were naturally heat-resistant, so she could work on systems that were still warm without protective gear. And her spatial reasoning, something all dragons had from their evolutionary history of building massive stone layers, helped her visualize the three-dimensional puzzle of how components fit together. But more than her physical abilities, Tom valued her mind. When she pointed out a potential stress point, he listened. When she asked why something was designed a certain way, he explained his thinking and asked for her perspective. They weren't master and apprentice, they were partners solving problems together. The fusion drive roared to life on the first test, running smoother and more efficiently than its specifications promised. Tom whooped with joy and high-fived Ember's claw, which felt awkward but made her laugh anyway. Over the following weeks they fell into a natural rhythm. Morning started with Tom reviewing the day's jobs over terrible human coffee that Ember learned to tolerate. They'd tackle the complex repairs together, with Tom handling the heavy fabrication work while Ember managed the precision assembly. Afternoons were for the routine maintenance jobs, which they'd split up to handle more efficiently. But the best times were the evenings after the regular work was done. That's when they'd pull out the experimental projects, wild ideas that Tom had been sketching in notebooks for years but never had time to attempt. He'd explain some crazy modification he wanted to try, and Ember would point out the flaws in his approach. Then they'd argue about solutions, test different configurations, and usually end up creating something neither of them had originally envisioned. Tom taught Ember that rules were starting points, not endpoints. Every manufacturer's manual said, "Do not modify," but Tom treated that as a challenge. Why accept 15% efficiency loss as normal operating parameters when you could redesign the system to eliminate it? Why follow the standard repair procedure when a creative solution could make the component better than new? Ember taught Tom about structural integrity and material sciences in ways human engineering didn't fully appreciate. Dragons built things to last for centuries, and that perspective changed how they approached repairs. She also brought a careful precision to balance Tom's sometimes reckless creativity. When his modifications got too wild, she'd rein him in with practical concerns. When her approach got too conservative, he'd push her to think bigger. Word spread quickly through Rust Haven. Tom's station had always been respected for fast, reliable work, but now something had changed. Ships that came in for basic repairs left running better than they had in years. Captains started requesting Tom and Ember specifically, willing to wait longer for their services rather than go to other mechanics. One captain brought in a cargo hauler with a failing power distribution system. By all standard procedures, it would require replacing half the ship's electrical grid, an expensive, time-consuming job. Tom and Ember traced the problem to a design flaw in the main junction box and redesigned it entirely. The repair cost 1/10 the expected price and left the ship more reliable than when it was new. Another ship came in with a mysterious vibration in its engine that 3 different mechanics had failed to diagnose. Ember's dragon hearing picked up a harmonic frequency that human ears couldn't detect. They traced it to a cracked mounting bracket that conventional sensors had missed. Tom fabricated a replacement with an improved design that prevented the stress that caused the original crack. Every day brought new challenges, and every challenge became an opportunity to learn and improve. Ember worked harder than she ever had in her life, but for the first time that work felt meaningful. She wasn't trying to live up to impossible standards or be someone she wasn't. She was using her actual skills and interests to solve real problems. Tom never once commented on her dull bronze scales or crooked horns. He praised her clever solutions, her careful attention to detail, and her ability to spot problems others missed. When she made mistakes, which happened plenty, he treated them as learning opportunities, not failures. For the first time in her life, Ember felt valued for exactly who she was. And that feeling was better than any amount of praise for being something she could never be. 3 months after Ember arrived at Rust Haven, a sleek diplomatic shuttle landed at Tom's repair station. The vessel bore the official markings of the Scale-born Trade Authority, and Ember's heart sank the moment she saw it. She knew exactly why they were here. A dragon named Lord Theron emerged from the shuttle, his crimson scales polished to perfection and his official robes flowing dramatically. He was one of her father's senior trade envoys, known for his strict adherence to tradition and his disdain for anything he considered beneath dragon dignity. Theron looked around the repair station with barely concealed disgust, his nostrils flaring at the smell of machine oil and welding fumes. His eyes found Ember, who was in the middle of calibrating a navigation computer, her claws covered in diagnostic gel and her scales smudged with grease. "Lady Ember," Theron said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "Your father sent me to check on your progress." Ember wiped her claws on a rag and stood up straight. "I'm doing well, Lord Theron. Tom has been an excellent teacher." At that moment, Tom came sliding out from under a ship's landing gear, his face covered in hydraulic fluid. "Ember, can you hand me the torque wrench? The big one, not the—" He stopped when he saw they had a visitor. "Oh, hey there. You must be from Ember's family. Great timing, we just figured out how to boost the efficiency on plasma regulators by almost 20%. Want to see?" Theron looked at Tom the way someone might look at dirt on their shoe. "I am Lord Theron of the Scale-born Trade Authority. I am here on official business, not to observe your tinkering." Tom shrugged and got back under the landing gear. "Suit yourself. Ember, that wrench." Ember handed Tom the tool and Theron watched the exchange with growing horror. She was serving a human? Acting like a common laborer? He'd expected to find her miserable and humbled, begging to return home. Instead she seemed almost happy. "Lady Ember, I need to speak with you privately," Theron said firmly. They walked outside, away from the noise of the workshop. Theron wasted no time. "What are you doing? You're the daughter of Lord Varkith, one of the most powerful merchants in the Empire, and you're covered in grease like some kind of maintenance worker." "I'm learning engineering," Ember said simply. "Real engineering, not just theory. This is humiliating. Do you know what the other noble families are saying? They're laughing at your father. They're saying his bloodline must be weak if his daughter prefers working for a human over proper dragon pursuits." Ember felt a flash of anger. "Tell them I don't care what they think." Theron's eyes widened. "You don't care? Your father's reputation is being damaged. He sent you here to teach you humility, and instead you're making things worse by actually enjoying it." "Maybe he should have thought of that before he sent me away as a joke," Ember shot back. Theron looked like he'd been slapped. He recovered quickly, his expression turning cold. "I will report what I've seen here. Don't be surprised when your father takes action to correct this embarrassment." He left in his pristine shuttle, and Ember stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of what was coming. She'd been happy for 3 months, actually happy, and now the galaxy was going to try to drag her back into misery. Tom found her standing outside, staring at the sky. "Hey, you okay?" That guy seemed like a real piece of work. "They're not going to let this continue," Ember said quietly. "My father, the other dragons, they think what I'm doing here is shameful." Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I think is shameful? Having an incredible talent and wasting it because other people have stupid opinions about what you should be doing." He put a hand on her shoulder. "You're one of the best engineers I've ever worked with, Ember. If your family can't see that, that's their loss." His words helped, but Ember knew this was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, another visitor arrived. This one wasn't from the dragon nobility, it was worse. A representative from the Galactic Mechanics Guild stepped off a commercial transport, carrying an official inspection tablet and wearing the Guild's distinctive silver badge. The Guild was the most prestigious engineering organization in known space. They set standards, certified professionals, and maintained strict protocols that supposedly kept everyone safe. They also had a well-known hatred for human mechanics, who they viewed as dangerous rule breakers. The representative was a tall, thin alien named Inspector Welks from a species that valued precision and order above all else. He moved through Tom's workshop like he was documenting a crime scene, taking notes on everything that violated Guild standards. "This plasma torch is not properly secured according to Regulation 743, Welks droned. "This workbench does not have the required safety barriers. This modified engine component is not certified for the application it's being used in." The list went on and on. Tom watched with his arms crossed. "Everything here works perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually." "That is irrelevant," Welks said. "The Guild maintains standards for the safety of all species. Your modifications are untested and dangerous. Your methods are reckless." He turned to Ember. "And you are training an apprentice in these dangerous practices." "She's learning real engineering," Tom said. "Not just how to follow instruction manuals." Welks's expression turned even colder, which Ember hadn't thought possible. "The Guild has received numerous complaints about your operation. We are prepared to revoke your certification if you do not bring this facility into compliance within 30 days. "Revoke it then," Tom said flatly. "I don't need your permission to fix things. Without Guild certification, no major corporation or government will contract with you. Your business will fail." Welks turned to Ember. "And as for you, young dragon, training under an uncertified, non-compliant mechanic will make you unemployable anywhere in civilized space. No reputable engineering firm will hire someone with such irregular credentials." He pulled out a data pad. "However, the Guild is willing to show mercy. I can arrange for you to apprentice with Master Beverly Chin, a highly respected Guild-certified engineer. She can salvage your career and teach you proper methods. All you have to do is leave this place." Ember looked at the data pad, then at Tom, then back at Welks. Every logical part of her brain screamed that she should accept. Guild certification meant security, respectability, and opportunities throughout the galaxy. Staying here meant burning bridges she could never rebuild. But she thought about the last 3 months. She thought about the freedom to explore ideas, to make mistakes and learn from them, to push boundaries and discover what was possible. She thought about working with someone who valued her mind instead of tolerating her presence. "No," Ember said firmly. "I'm staying here." Welks looked genuinely shocked. You're refusing guild certification? Do you understand what you're throwing away? I understand that I've learned more about real engineering in 3 months with Tom than I did in 20 years of formal dragon education, Ember said. I understand that your proper methods care more about following rules than solving problems. And I understand that I'd rather be a good engineer than a certified one. Welks's face went through several interesting colors. You're making a terrible mistake. Both of you. He headed for the door then turned back. The guild will be watching this operation. And when your reckless methods cause an accident, and they will, we'll make sure everyone knows the dangers of ignoring proper standards. After he left, Tom let out a long breath. Well, that went well. Ember tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. I just destroyed my future, didn't I? Nah, Tom said, getting back to work. You just chose a different future. One where you actually get to be yourself. He grinned at her. Besides, we don't need the guild's approval. We've got something better, satisfied customers who keep coming back. Ember wanted to believe him. But she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse before they got better. Lord Varkith sat in his private chambers, reading the reports from both Lord Theron and the Galactic Mechanics Guild with growing fury. His plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of being humiliated and begging to come home, Ember was thriving. Worse, she'd publicly rejected both dragon nobility and guild certification to stay with that human mechanic. The other dragon lords were having a field day with it. At the last trade council, Lord Drexus had made a pointed comment about how some bloodlines were clearly weakening. Lady Xynthia had asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, if Varkith's daughter was planning to open a repair shop for peasants. The laughter had been humiliating. Varkith made a decision. If Ember wouldn't come home willingly, and if simply revoking the human's credentials wouldn't work, then he'd need to destroy Tom's reputation so thoroughly that even Ember would have to admit defeat. He put out a private contract. 1 million credits to any guild-certified master mechanic who could beat Tom Brady in a public competition. The challenge would be simple. Each mechanic would be given a catastrophically damaged warship. Whoever could restore their ship to working condition first would win. The loser would have to leave Rusthaven permanently. Within 48 hours, Varkith had his challenger. Master Kyle Henderson, a human engineer with 70 years of experience and the highest level of guild certification. Kyle had trained under the most prestigious programs in human space before joining the guild. He'd written 3 textbooks on proper repair procedures and had never failed an inspection. He was everything Tom wasn't: organized, certified, respectable, and completely by the book. Kyle also had personal reasons for accepting. He'd spent his entire career fighting against the stereotype that human mechanics were reckless cowboys. Engineers like Tom, who ignored safety protocols and modified everything they touched, made all humans look bad in the eyes of other species. Kyle saw this as a chance to prove that proper human engineering was just as disciplined as any other species. The challenge was announced publicly, and within days, Rusthaven was flooded with observers. Guild officials came to ensure fair judging. News services sent reporters. Even some of Tom's regular customers showed up to watch, though they looked worried. Tom and Ember stood in front of their assigned warship, and Ember's heart sank. The vessel was a disaster. It had been caught in a plasma storm that had fried most of its systems. The hull had multiple breaches, the power core was barely holding together, and the navigation systems were completely dead. By any reasonable standard, the ship should be stripped for parts and recycled. Across the hangar, Master Kyle examined his equally destroyed vessel with calm professionalism. His team of guild-certified assistants was already setting up equipment and pulling up diagnostic holograms. The rules were clear. They had 72 hours, they could only use parts and materials available in Rusthaven, and the ships had to pass a basic flight certification test at the end. Guild inspectors would judge based on safety, compliance with standards, and restoration quality. A buzzer sounded and the competition began. Kyle's approach was methodical and precise. He started with a complete diagnostic of every system, documenting each failure point. His team worked like a well-oiled machine, following procedures exactly as written in the guild manual. They replaced damaged components with standard parts, rewired systems to original specifications, and maintained detailed logs of every action. Tom and Ember took a completely different approach. They spent the first 4 hours just walking around the ship, with Tom pointing at damaged sections and muttering to himself while Ember traced power conduits and structural supports with her claws. "Okay," Tom finally said. "This ship is dead if we try to restore it normally. We'd need parts we don't have and time we don't have. So we're not going to restore it, we're going to rebuild it." Rebuild it? Ember asked. Into what? Tom's grin was slightly manic. Something better. What followed was 3 days of the most intense work Ember had ever experienced. They didn't just repair the damaged power core, they completely redesigned the power distribution system, using components salvaged from 3 different ship types that were never meant to work together. Tom showed Ember how to crosswire systems that guild manuals explicitly said were incompatible. The hull breaches couldn't be patched with standard materials they had available, so they used a technique Tom had been experimenting with. A composite of 3 different alloys that actually ended up stronger than the original hull plating. Ember used her dragon knowledge of structural integrity to identify exactly where reinforcement was needed and where they could save weight. The navigation system was completely unsalvageable, so they built a new one from scratch using parts from civilian ships, military surplus components, and some creative programming that made guild observers physically uncomfortable to watch. They worked in shifts, with one of them always awake and working while the other grabbed a few hours of sleep. Tom survived on terrible coffee and pure stubborn determination. Ember discovered that dragons could actually function surprisingly well on very little sleep when properly motivated by spite. Around hour 60, one of the guild observers came by to check their progress. He watched them reroute the engine coolant through a system that was technically designed for waste recycling, looked at his clipboard and made a note that probably wasn't positive. You know, this violates about 15 different safety protocols, the observer said. Does it work? Tom asked, not looking up from his welding. That's not the point. That's exactly the point, Tom said. Either it works or it doesn't. The rest is just paperwork. Master Kyle finished his ship with 6 hours to spare. The guild observers conducted their inspection and nodded approvingly. Every system had been restored to factory specifications. Every component met safety standards. The work was flawless, professional, and exactly what the guild expected. Tom and Ember powered up their ship with 15 minutes left on the clock. The sound it made was wrong, not bad wrong but different wrong. The engine had a deeper hum than standard drives. The power readouts were showing numbers that shouldn't be possible. When they ran the flight certification test, their ship accelerated faster, turned more responsively, and used less fuel than the original specifications indicated. The guild inspectors ran their diagnostics 3 times because they couldn't believe the readings. Tom and Ember's ship wasn't just functional, it was operating at 130% of the original performance specs. The rebuilt power system was more efficient. The modified hull was stronger and lighter. The Frankenstein navigation system had capabilities the original designers never imagined. But when the final judgment came, Master Kyle was declared the winner. The head inspector explained the decision to the assembled crowd. While both ships are functional, Master Henderson's vessel meets all safety requirements and compliance standards. Brady's ship, despite its impressive performance, violates 17 separate guild protocols. The modifications are untested, the component combinations are not certified, and the overall design does not meet standardization requirements. He turned to Tom. Per the terms of the challenge, you have 1 week to vacate your repair station and leave Rust Haven. The crowd murmured. Some of Tom's regular customers looked angry, but the guild's decision was final. Tom had lost everything. Ember felt numb. This was her fault. If she'd just gone home when her father wanted, none of this would have happened. Tom was losing his business because he'd been kind enough to take her in. But before anyone could leave, a voice cut through the crowd. Hold on just a minute. A weathered woman in a ship captain's jacket pushed her way forward. Ember recognized her, Captain Rachel Stone, the owner of the warship they just rebuilt. I'm the one who's buying this ship, Rachel said loudly. And I don't give a damn about your guild protocols. Captain Rachel Stone had been hauling cargo through the frontier for 30 years, and she'd seen every type of mechanic the galaxy had to offer. She'd dealt with guild-certified professionals who did everything by the book and charged triple for the privilege. She dealt with cheap operators who cut corners and left her stranded in deep space. And she dealt with Tom Brady, who'd kept her ships running through situations that should have been impossible. Rachel walked up to the guild inspector and pointed at the rebuilt warship. That's my vessel. I'm the one paying for it. And I want to know something. Which ship would keep me alive out in the frontier where the nearest repair dock is 3 weeks away? The inspector looked uncomfortable. Both ships meet minimum flight certification standards. That's not what I asked, Rachel interrupted. Kyle's ship is restored to factory specs, right? So it'll perform exactly like it did before it got damaged. Which means it'll have all the same weaknesses and limitations it always had. She pointed at Tom and Ember's ship. But that ship? It's better than it was when it rolled off the assembly line. It's faster, tougher, and more efficient. So here's my question. If you were hauling cargo through pirate territory or dodging asteroid fields, which one would you rather be flying? The inspector opened his mouth, then closed it again. Everyone knew the answer. I'm paying Tom triple the agreed price, Rachel announced to the crowd. And I'm offering him an exclusive contract to maintain my entire fleet. 8 ships, ongoing maintenance, and full creative freedom to modify them however he sees fit. The guild officials looked scandalized, but Rachel wasn't finished. She turned to address the other ship captains and traders in the crowd. How many of you operate out here on the frontier? How many of you are weeks away from the nearest guild-certified facility? About 24 hands went up. And how many times have you been told that a repair would take weeks and cost a fortune, when all you needed was someone willing to think outside the box? Knowing looks spread through the crowd. Every independent operator had experienced that frustration. Tom Brady doesn't just fix ships, he makes them better, Rachel said. Yeah, he breaks your precious rules. But out here, we don't have the luxury of waiting for proper certified parts or following procedures that were written by people who've never left civilized space. We need mechanics who can solve problems, not quote regulations. A grizzled hauler captain named Jack stepped forward. Rachel's right. Tom rebuilt my coolant system last year with parts from 2 completely different manufacturers. The guild said it was impossible and dangerous. That dangerous system has been running perfectly for 14 months and saved me from overheating during a solar flare that would have cooked me otherwise. Another captain spoke up. He modified my shield generators using a technique he invented himself. Cut my power consumption by 20%. When I asked a guild mechanic about it, they said it couldn't work. But it does work. More voices joined in. Tom had a reputation on the frontier, not for following rules but for getting results. He'd kept ships running that other mechanics had written off as scrap. He'd found creative solutions to problems that proper engineering said were unsolvable. The guild inspector tried to regain control. Anecdotal success does not override safety standards. These modifications may work temporarily, but without proper testing and certification, they pose long-term risks. I've been flying with Tom's modifications for 6 years, interrupted a transport captain named Lisa. My ship has never run better. How long does something have to work before you people accept that maybe your standards aren't the only way? The inspector had no answer for that. Within an hour, Tom had a line of frontier captains outside his station, all wanting to contract for his services. They didn't care about guild certification. They cared about having ships that could handle the harsh realities of operating far from civilized space. The guild officials left in disgust, muttering about reckless frontier attitudes and inevitable disasters. Master Kyle packed up his equipment professionally, though he couldn't quite hide his confusion about why everyone was celebrating the person who'd technically lost. Tom was standing in his workshop, still trying to process what had just happened, when Ember heard the distinctive sound of a heavy shuttle landing. Her heart sank. She knew that engine signature. Lord Varkith had come personally. The massive Crimson Dragon emerged from his shuttle surrounded by 4 armed guards. He looked around the repair station with even more disdain than Lord Theron had shown, then his eyes locked onto Ember. Enough of this foolishness, Varkith said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You've humiliated our family for the last time. You're coming home and we will never speak of this embarrassment again. Ember felt small under her father's gaze. For a moment she was a child again, always disappointing, always wrong, always trying to be something she could never be. Then Tom stepped between them. With respect, Lord Varkith, Tom said calmly, Ember isn't your property to reclaim. She's an adult and a talented engineer who's chosen to stay here. Varkith's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare speak to me about my own daughter? You're the reason she's become this disgrace. Working with her hands like a common laborer, covered in filth, consorting with someone who values her for who she actually is? Tom interrupted. Yeah, guilty as charged. The guards moved forward threateningly, but Tom didn't back down. You sent her here as a joke. You wanted to humiliate me and punish her at the same time. But you know what? You gave her the greatest gift you could have. You let her be free of your expectations. Varkith's scales rippled with barely contained fury. I could destroy you. One word from me and you'll never work in this sector again. Maybe, Tom shrugged. But you can't make her respect you. You can't make her be the daughter you wanted. All you can do is keep trying to force her into a mold she'll never fit, and watch her be miserable. For the first time since her father arrived, Ember found her voice. He's right, Father. Varkith turned to her and she saw something flicker in his eyes, maybe surprised that she'd spoken at all. You sent me here because you were ashamed of me, Ember continued, her voice growing stronger. Because I didn't have the right color scales or the right interests or the right anything. And you know what? You were right to send me away. Because here I found out what I actually am. She gestured around the cluttered workshop. I'm a good engineer. Not despite my obsession with machines, but because of it. Tom sees that. His customers see that. The only people who don't see it are the ones who think there's only one way to be valuable. You're throwing away your heritage, Varkith said coldly. Your position, your family, everything you are. I'm not throwing it away, Ember interrupted. You threw me away. You just didn't expect that I'd land somewhere better. Varkith stood silent for a long moment. Then he spoke with a tone of absolute finality. If you stay here, you are no longer my daughter. The family will disown you completely. You'll have no inheritance, no support, no place in dragon society. You'll be nothing. Ember met his gaze without flinching. Then I'll be nothing. But I'll be happy. The words hung in the air. Varkith's expression went through several changes. Rage, disbelief, and perhaps something that might have been hurt if dragons admitted to such emotions. So be it, he finally said. He turned and walked back to his shuttle, his guards following. At the entrance he paused. Don't come back. Ever. I won't, Ember said quietly. The shuttle lifted off and disappeared into the sky. Ember stood there, feeling strange. She'd just lost her entire family, her inheritance, her place in dragon society, everything that was supposed to matter. But she'd also kept something more important. Tom put a hand on her shoulder. You okay? I don't know, Ember admitted. Ask me tomorrow. Captain Rachel came over, along with several other captains who'd witnessed the exchange. That was one of the bravest things I've ever seen a kid do, Rachel said. Standing up to a dragon lord like that. For what it's worth, Jack added, you've got a family here. All of us frontier folks, we look out for each other. You and Tom keep our ships running, we'll make sure nobody messes with you. Over the next few days, the reality of what happened began to sink in. Ember received an official notice that she'd been removed from all family records. Several dragon-owned corporations added her to their blacklists. The guild sent a formal letter saying she'd never be eligible for certification after training under a non-compliant mechanic. But Tom's workshop was busier than ever. Frontier captains kept coming, drawn by word of mouth about the human mechanic and his dragon partner who could make ships perform like magic. The contracts poured in, not from prestigious corporations or government fleets, but from the independent operators who actually explored the galaxy's edges. 5 years passed. Tom and Ember's repair station had expanded into a full shipyard. They'd taken on 12 apprentices, species that the guild had rejected as unsuitable for proper engineering. A spider-like alien whose multiple limbs could work on 6 systems simultaneously. A methane breather whose unique perspective on chemistry led to breakthrough fuel efficiency improvements. A young human woman who'd been told she was too creative to follow protocols properly. Each of them had been considered defective by someone's standards. Each of them thrived under Tom's chaotic teaching style and Ember's patient guidance. Their modified ships had become legendary on the frontier. Captains bragged about having Brady and Ember mods, the way others bragged about guild certification. Their hybrid techniques, combining human innovation with dragon engineering principles, had started spreading throughout independent shipyards. The Galactic Mechanics Guild still refused to acknowledge them. Trade councils still whispered about Lord Varkith's disgraceful daughter. None of it mattered. Ember's scales were permanently stained with a dozen different types of lubricant that no amount of cleaning could remove. Her horns were decorated with small tool charms that clinked when she moved. Her claws were scarred from countless hours of precision work. She'd never been happier. One evening, after finishing a particularly complex modification to her explorer vessel, Tom and Ember sat on the station's roof, watching ships come and go from the spaceport. Ever regret it? Tom asked. Walking away from all that Dragon Lord wealth and prestige? Ember thought about it seriously. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd tried harder to fit in. If I'd hidden who I was and played the part everyone wanted. And then I remember that I'd have been miserable pretending to be someone else. She looked at the ships, each one carrying modifications they designed together. This is real. What we build, the problems we solve, the people we help, it's all real. The other life would have been a comfortable lie. Tom nodded. The galaxy's got plenty of people following the rules and doing things the proper way. But out here on the frontier, we need people who can think differently. People who see problems as possibilities. Is that the human way? Ember asked with a slight smile. Nah, Tom grinned. That's just the way of people who refuse to let someone else define their limits. Humans just happen to be particularly good at it. They sat in comfortable silence, two misfits who'd found exactly where they belonged. The galaxy could keep its standards, its protocols, and its prestigious certifications. Out here on the frontier, among the traders and explorers and dreamers who pushed into the unknown, there was only one standard that mattered. Does it work? And Tom and Ember's work spoke for itself.